Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the SOAR Act Educator Pipeline pre-application webinar. My name is Jessica Mardo, and I am one of the grant specialists on the federal funding team here at OSSE. I manage the SOAR Educator Pipeline grant, the SOAR third-party grant, as well as a subset of SOAR formula grantees as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. I will ask that we hold questions until the end of the presentation. We actually have a prepared FAQ section available, and if we have time, we'll walk through that. If we're running short on time, I will just take questions at that time. If anything comes to you during the presentation, please feel free to drop that in the chat, and I'll be able to access that after the presentation. So for our outcomes today, we're hoping that all of our attendees will be able to understand the purpose and the requirements of the SOAR Educator Pipeline grant, which includes the purpose of the funds, eligibility and partnership requirements, our priority areas, and key competition details and deadlines. We also would like all applicants to be familiar with the application components and the review process, and also be familiar with how to access the Enterprise Grants Management System, EGMS. That's where our application is located, and we just want folks to feel comfortable with that system and know who to contact with any issues or questions. So first today, we'll be discussing the purpose of funds. The SOAR Act is a federal law that authorizes funding to improve and expand quality public charter schools in DC. And the purpose of this specific grant, Educator Pipeline, is to impact the quality and quantity of potential educators for DC public charter schools. And programs who are eligible for this grant are supporting this effort by either recruiting high quality candidates for DC public charter schools, teacher residency, teacher or school leader roles, or they are training and certifying these educators. In terms of our funds available and our funding period, we anticipate making 3 to 5 awards of up to $500,000 each through this competition. And of course, that depends on application quality and funding availability. And awards under this competition are limited to 1 award per organization. The award period will be 3 years, and it will begin on October 1st, 2024, with pre-award costs allowed back to July 1st, 2024. And for those of you who might be returning grantees, you may notice that that's a little different. We heard your feedback, and we're very excited to expand this award period to 3 years and to align the grant with the fiscal year. I will be speaking extensively about pre-award costs in later slides, so I know that will be a new area for all of us. So if any questions come up, please write those down and share them in the chat. Award amounts will not exceed $10,000 per educator served by the proposed program. And just 2 other key pieces related to funding here that I'd like to overview. The SOAR Educator Pipeline grant may not be the sole source of funding for the proposed program. An application should also include a description of how the full cost of the program will be covered. And secondly, if a nonprofit grantee is partnering with a local LEA, the total funding amount for both grantees may not exceed $10,000 per teacher. And we're excited for that updated amount as well. For those of you who may have received this grant in past years, or you may have looked at RFAs from past years, that limit used to be $7,500. So we're very excited to have that new increased amount in response to feedback from grantees. So lots of new, exciting changes here. So I'll speak briefly about pre-award costs here, and then we will discuss them at length when we're walking through the specific parts of the application in EGMS. So grantees will be able to charge allowable pre-award costs back to July 1st, 2024. Pre-award costs are costs that are incurred prior to the effective date of the grant award, which we expect to be October 1st, 2024, directly pursuant to the negotiation and in anticipation of the award, where such costs are reasonable and necessary for the performance of the scope of work. So in regular words, the pre-award costs must be sort of allowable and directly related to any activities that are required to stand up the program in July, August, and September. Grantees will be asked to identify pre-award costs in their budget, and I will be walking through that process in detail in a few moments. And all grantees will receive written approval of their pre-award costs from OSSE if they are awarded. A couple of key points to keep in mind, and you'll notice these pieces of information in EGMS and the application as well. Pre-award costs are a part of and not in addition to the total grant award. Costs incurred by an applicant before receiving an award are done so at the applicant's own risk. And OSSE is not obligated to reimburse these costs if the applicant does not receive an award or if the costs are not allowable. So those are some key things to keep in mind when we're thinking about pre-award costs. I sort of mentioned this already, so I'll quickly walk through this slide. As I mentioned, allowable pre-award costs in each program area are essentially those related to the standing up or continuation of an educator pipeline program. So you can see here under each bullet, we have our major budget areas that, again, I will discuss in detail when we get to the walkthrough of the application. But as you can see, all of these examples of allowable costs are items that one would imagine a program or an LEA would incur in July, August, and September as they're starting up or beginning their educator pipeline program. For any pre-award costs that are not on this list, OSSE will make individual determinations about allowability when we review your application. So now we'll be talking a little bit about eligibility and partnership requirements for this grant. So there are a few eligible organizations. The first is nonprofit charter support organizations, which includes institutes of higher education. The second group is individual DC public charter LEAs. And the third group is a consortium of district public charter LEAs. So let's specifically talk about eligibility for nonprofit organizations. So the nonprofit applicant must have a demonstrated history of success working with charter schools on similar education pipeline programs. And they must commit to serve 2 or more DC LEAs under the program proposed in the application, DC charter LEAs, I should specify. So those are our key eligibility pieces for any nonprofit applicants. For our LEA applicants, they must be a charter LEA or a consortium of charter LEAs who are in good standing with the DC Public Charter School Board, and they must partner under the grant with one or more nonprofit third-party charter support organizations who have a demonstrated history of success working with charter schools on educator pipeline programs. And a consortium must apply through a lead applicant and submit a letter of commitment from each member of that consortium. So let's get into our competition details. We have a great table here that outlines our next steps. As you all know, because you're here, our RFA was released on May 15th, 2024, and can be found on our website. This PowerPoint presentation and a recording of today will be posted on our webpage afterwards and emailed to all attendees who submit an intent to apply form. So you will be able to click on all of these live links that are found throughout the presentation today. So in our first row here, we have our pre-application webinar. You are all here and getting key information on the competition timeline and updates on the award period and important parts of the process this year. The next step is a submission of a notice of intent to apply form. Now, if we have any returning grantees here, you'll remember in past years that the notice of intent to apply was mandatory. It is optional this year. However, I am greatly benefited if you all are able to submit a notice of intent to apply. It helps me properly plan for the competition. And as I just mentioned at the beginning of this slide, if we have a notice of intent to apply from you on file by this deadline, Friday, May 31st, I will be able to send you email updates about particular parts of the process. So for example, when these slides and this webinar is publicly posted, everyone who has An intent to apply on file will receive an email, as an example. So there's a benefit to submitting that intent to apply, and I would greatly appreciate it. You can find that on our SOAR webpage, and it's also in the appendix section of the RFA as well. And that can be submitted to us via email, and I will confirm receipt once I receive that. Our next big deadline, of course, is the application deadline for this grant. The application will be submitted in EGMS, and it is due no later than 3 p.m. on Monday, July 1st. I'll say briefly here, and I will say a few other times throughout this presentation, that this deadline is strictly enforced. So applicants are strongly encouraged to submit their application at least a day prior, maybe even two. So I would ignore that July 1st deadline that you all see here, and I would put an earlier deadline on your internal calendars. We cannot allow a late submission for any reason. That includes technical reasons, if your LEA head of school is on vacation, if someone can't get into EGMS, there are virtually no exceptions. So any application received after 3:01 p.m. on Monday, July 1st will not be accepted. So we highly, highly encourage our applicants to plan to submit at least one day early to account for any challenges that might occur. And finally, our anticipated award date is October 1st, 2024 at the start of the fiscal year, and we will notify all applicants whether or not they were awarded, both through EGMS and via email. Okay, so now we're ready to dive into the EGMS application. These next several slides are going to give you all a pretty good sense of what the application looks like in EGMS, and I'll be walking through key parts and talking about key components to pay attention to. But again, first, I have to remind you all again about this deadline date. Applications are due no later than 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, July 1st. And again, you already heard my encouragement to please try to submit at least one day early. We certainly have seen issues in the past where technical issues and other complications do prevent organizations from successfully submitting. So don't leave it to that last day, maybe not even that day before. Get that earlier date on your internal calendars so that you are able to successfully submit the application. Okay, so when you first arrive at EGMS, you will want to log in. For those of you on the call who are returning grantees or otherwise familiar with EGMS, you can just go ahead and log in. For folks here who might be new applicants, you'll just want to register for EGMS by clicking login and then new user. All of our applicants must agree to the insurances on central data. Before I post this to the website and let you all know that it's publicly posted, I need to update this. This will be 2025 central data. And so you all just need to agree to the assurances here before you can begin your application. And then once you do that, you'll proceed to your organization's dashboard and you'll be able to select the SOAR Educator Pipeline grant. And you'll click this hyperlink here that's outlined in red to begin your application for FY25. So over the next several slides, we'll be walking through the different components of the online application. You can follow along here by seeing what I have outlined in yellow, and then of course here in the red text, you can see what part of the application that I'm discussing. So first we'll start with the overview and the contact information. There's actually nothing that applicants need to complete on the overview tab, but we have some helpful general information about the program and the competition, similar to the information that I shared in the beginning slides. One important thing here is our scoring rubric, and this is the rubric that our external reviewers will use to score and rank each application. So if you haven't already looked at that scoring rubric in the RFA, I would encourage you to make sure you look at it here closely in EGMS. Certainly that is information, just like any student in any one of our classrooms, they would review a rubric before they started on a project or an assignment. We highly encourage our applicants to carefully review the rubric before beginning to fill out the narrative portions of the application. The contact information tab is very straightforward. This is where each applicant will just be adding in their contact information for project staff and key points of contact for the organization. So next, under our partner information section, we have sort of like lists and quick information that we need here. So for our nonprofit or higher education partners who are applying, this is where they'll list their public charter school partners. And the reverse of that, this is where our LEA applicants will list their participating nonprofit or higher education partner. So everyone just has to list who their partner is here, regardless of what type of applicant they are. This is also where we'll need the letter of commitments from said partners. And this is where you'll speak briefly on a demonstrated history of success. So for all of the partners named, just talk a little bit about the past experiences, working on similar projects, and then this is a space for applicants to provide information about who else they have provided similar services to. That's probably more so for our nonprofit applicants, but this just gives our applicants a space to talk to us about how you have a demonstrated history of success doing this work. Okay, so now we're jumping into our main application. I've got a couple of slides on this, so bear with me. This is really what I would say is the heart, the crux, the foundation of the entire application. And first here in the main application is the needs assessment. So this is where our applicants will be using qualitative and quantitative data to demonstrate the needs of their LEA. And you really want to think of this as like a through line. The information that you provide here, it should be really clear on why this project is necessary as our reviewers are reading the rest of the application. Project description that we're asking for here. I've outlined that here specifically in these bullets. So returning grantees will notice that we've updated this section and there's a lot of new information that we're asking for here. So first, we need a little bit of information about how the applicant will be recruiting participants to the program. And then some information about training, professional development, learning opportunities, mentoring, these sorts of things that participants will access throughout the life cycle of the program. Just tell us what's being offered to them. We need some information about how program participants will meet the following two benchmarks: how they'll be hired by a DC LEA within 1 year of their program completion, and plans to remain employed as an educator at an LEA for 3 years. So just walk us through that. We'll also need some information on the applicant's management plan to ensure the success of the project. So this is where you're specifying who is doing what and who is responsible for specific activities. And finally, we'd like information on how each applicant will track and report progress internally towards their anticipated outcomes. All right, so we're still in that main application section. And next, we've got our theory of action. And this is really the part of the application where we'd like to see the evidence for the project and the program that you all are proposing. And it will be taking the following format that we see here in that first bullet point. So if we do X activity, expect to see Y outcome as a result of research and evidence that demonstrates Z. So this is really the section where we're asking you to support your program with evidence. Our equitable access and participation question is a simple description of how program participants with special needs will have equitable access to grant-funded activities. And with our logic model, we're asking that everyone use our logic model linked here. And again, you will all receive these slides via email if you submit an intent to apply, and these slides will be posted on our website. So you will be able to click on that link. I just want to specify here that we do have a change from previous years. In the past, for multiple partners, we asked for a different Excel spreadsheet for each partner, but this year we want one single logic model, so one Excel template, and we want different tabs for each partner. So one spreadsheet, multiple tabs. That information will also be in EGMS when you're getting to this section. So as long as you carefully read the instructions, you shouldn't miss that, but I did want to call that out specifically here. And finally, we have some additional training slides linked for further instructions on how to complete a logic model. All right, so we're out of main application and we're moving to our. So just sort of a quick overview on a couple of high-level points for funding priority. OSSE may elect to fund priority projects at a higher level than non-priority projects. And if there are more quality applications that we receive than there are available funds, we may also elect to fund priority projects instead of one or more non-priority projects that received a higher score. So that's just something important to keep in mind. A new update that we have this year is that projects that address a priority area will be awarded plus 10 points. If your project somehow miraculously addresses all 4 of these areas, or 3 of them, or 2 of them, or 1, it's a blanket plus 10 points. So you cannot earn more. You can earn just a flat plus 10 if your project addresses 1 or more of these areas. And it's perfectly acceptable if your project does not address a priority area. You can still submit that application. There will just be no additional points awarded. And we do have some exciting new priorities for FY25 that I'm excited to share with you all below. Perhaps some of you already saw them in the RFA. Just a brief background on where these come from. Our team did a lot of work engaging with the OSSE strategic plan, which is public and available to all of you on our websites. And we met with lots of different internal divisions and teams at OSSE to create priorities that really aligned with the work that's being done across the agency and with that strategic plan. So be for projects that provide pathways for paraprofessionals or high impact tutors to become certified teachers. Our second priority is for projects that recruit and train CTE teachers. Our third priority area is recruiting and training special education teachers or supporting general education teachers to complete a special education micro-credential. And our fourth priority area is for projects developing a school leader pipeline or recruitment and training program. All right, so we're moving on to the budget section now. I know you've all been listening to me for 25 minutes, but we are about to get into a pretty detailed section. And there are a lot of changes here from prior years. So as we go into this section in the next 3 or 4 slides, I want everyone to take a deep breath and remain calm. I've worked very hard to create slides and share this information in a way that I hope is clear and concise for all of you. But I recognize that there will probably be questions over the next several slides. So as I'm speaking, if something is coming to mind, you're welcome to put it in the chat or just jot it down and you can bring it up in the chat when we do the Q&A. But I just want everyone to take a deep breath, remain calm, and we will get through this budget section together. So the good news here, nothing has changed from prior years. We will need you on the first section of the budget tab to share with us the proposed number of teachers that we expect to be recruited and trained. And then there'll be a spot for you to provide a detailed summary of your planned expenditures in narrative form. So this will essentially be paragraphs about your budget. And then we ask that your budget items are categorized into the following line items for each portion of your budget. So you're basically taking the narrative that you wrote in a couple of paragraphs and you'll be adding in each line item to a budget. Okay, so this is a little new. The cost basis field is what we have not seen in prior year applications. And I just want to emphasize the purpose of the cost basis field is just to help OSSE understand if the cost is reasonable and allowable. So I know it feels new and different, but in reality, all that we're asking you as an applicant to do is to provide just a little bit more context as to that specific line item in the budget. And I'll walk through what we mean by that now. In this example, we're using salaries and benefits. This is a very common field that we see. And so, for example, someone that might be charged to the salaries and benefits line in an educator pipeline grant could be the program manager. And you'll see here in this screenshot, this is what it looks like in the application. And I've created this little scenario for us to walk through. So we've got our program manager. In brief description of employee role, that's exactly what we mean. Just give 1 or 2 sentences about what this person is doing on the project. So here I've said the program manager is responsible for teacher resident recruitment, coaching, and planning PDs throughout the school year. Simple, straightforward. Cost basis is telling us a little bit about this person's annual salary, how much of that salary you'd like to charge to the grant, and what timeline you would like to charge it to. So it's actually fairly straightforward if you break it down into those chunks. So you can see that I've done that here in this cost basis field as an example. Total salary and benefits are $100,000. So this program manager makes $100,000. I wanted to use nice, easy numbers. 50% will be charged to the grant. Okay, so 50% of 100,000 is 50,000. Over 3 years for a total of 150,000. And then we've got the amount budgeted here. You just want to think of this cost basis field as context. This is allowing OSSE to see what this number actually means. So I would suggest that you model fairly closely to something like this for salaries and benefits, and you'll be all set. One aside that I would like to mention here is that when our external reviewers are scoring the budget portion of your application, and if you go to the rubric in the RFA, you can see exactly what they will be scoring. It's for big picture allowability and reasonableness. So if we have questions about cost basis or something doesn't look quite right, that will be an OSSE consideration after you are awarded. So our external reviewers, you don't have to worry. They are scoring this for general reasonability and allowability. If we have questions about the cost basis field or pre-award costs, which I will get to in a moment, those questions will come from us after you have received the grant. So you don't have to worry about having it perfectly right for our reviewers. They are scoring overall, very big picture. To ask questions about specifics and help you iron out any bumps if you are ultimately awarded. And so I actually debated putting in this slide. It's perhaps a little bit more information than you all need, but personally, I am someone that likes context. I like to understand the purpose behind why I'm being asked to do things. And so given that that's how I think, I wanted to give you all the same courtesy and just briefly explain why we have this new cost basis field. If what I'm about to say on this slide 26, feels confusing or you're getting a little nervous, you don't have to worry. This information that I'm about to share here is really only relevant if you become a grantee. And if you become a grantee, we are going to have an entire new additional post-award webinar where I will be discussing this in depth with many slides. So I just wanted to give the caveat that this is for context for those of you who like to know why you were being asked to do something. If you're finding this slide confusing or otherwise anxiety inducing, don't worry about it. If you are awarded, you will have an opportunity to learn much more about this at a later date. Essentially, the cost basis field is helping us at OSSE determine reasonability and allowability. And we added this field because we didn't really have the context for this amount budgeted in the past. So that is why we've added this cost basis field. How it will relate when you become a grantee is this percent charge to the grant field. So this second screenshot that I'm outlining with my mouse, this is a reimbursement request. As a brief aside, OSSE's grants are administered on a reimbursement basis. So if you become an awardee, we give you an award amount, the organization or the LEA expends the funds and submits a reimbursement request and then is paid, for those of you that were not aware. And so this is a screenshot, this bottom screenshot of what a reimbursement request looks like. And so this percent charge to the grant just needs to align with this percent charge to the grant up in the cost basis. So this is allowing us to do sort of a clear and complete review in our reimbursement request, and it's just linking to that context in the cost basis field. And this cost basis field is what is helping us determine overall reasonable and allowability with the budget. So for those of you that like additional information, I hope that's helpful. That's why we're asking for this. For those of you that are feeling a little anxious or confused, don't worry about it. If you later date. I wanted to just quickly share, I'm not going to walk through this. I'll just sort of voice over that because we provided that context 2 slides ago about how to complete the cost basis field for salaries and benefits. I wanted to provide some examples that you all could reference in the other budget categories. So professional services, equipment, supplies and materials, and other objects. So slide 27 here will be a great reference as you're going through the budget portion of the application. You can just peek at these examples and make sure you're doing that cost basis field right. As long as you're giving us the context, explaining a per unit cost, what something costs, per teacher, that's really what we're looking for there. And again, if there are questions or concerns related to that, those would be questions from OSSE, not necessarily anything that's being scored by our external reviewers. Okay, I need y'all to hang in there with me. We have this one last slightly technical and complicated slide, and then we're out of the woods. As I mentioned at the beginning, when we did an overview of pre-award costs, I mentioned pre-award costs must be included in the application. So here on slide 28, we've explained how we want to see that and what that means. So in this first scenario, this applicant has chosen not to utilize pre-award costs. So this is the same example from the previous slides. The program manager's total salary in benefits is $100,000, et cetera, et cetera. You have all the details here. So the grant starts on October 1, 2024. They will just start their reimbursement request here. Nice and easy. Unfortunately, I imagine most of you probably will not be in that situation. I imagine if you are awarded, you would want to take advantage of pre-award costs going back to July 1. And so while scenario 1 is the easy one, I imagine most of you all, if you become a grantee, will find yourselves in scenario 2. And it's actually not that complicated. We're looking for the same information that you would have put in the cost basis field to give us that context on the salary, the amount being charged to the grant. So that same information is here in this bottom box. Then we just need to know how much of that is going to be a pre-award cost. So it requires a little bit of math, but nothing too complicated. So in this example, we've said the pre-award costs are charged for, this is the program manager, who is training program participants in July, August, and September. Totally reasonable, completely allowable. It makes complete sense that teacher residents would go through training for their program in July, August, and September. And that's being conducted by this program manager. So this program manager earns $100,000 a year. So if you take their salary and divide it by 12, you have their monthly salary. And if you take that monthly salary and do times 3 for July, August, and September, that's $25,000. And we already know that the organization wants to charge 50% to the grant. So that's $12,500. And so all they've done here is just narratively outlined that for us, right? So pre-award costs are charged for training program participants in July, August, and September. The total salary earned in these 3 months is $25,000, with $12,500 being charged to the grant. So that is just giving us additional context. This is the overall that they're going to charge to the grant, and this is giving us the additional context of what is being charged in pre-award costs. Again, if this is feeling a little confusing, I don't really need you all to worry too much. I just need you to try your very best to mirror this in the application. The specifics of this, I'll say for the 20th time, are not what is being scored by our external reviewers, right? They are scoring for overall allowability and reasonableness of your budget. If we have questions, concerns about pre-award cost allowability, or things like that, OSSE will reach out to you all once you have been awarded. And this is just a recap slide. I'm not going to walk through sort of what is allowable, but again, costs generally related to standing up a program in our major categories, in our budget categories. We will provide that written approval of pre-award costs once awards are made. And you do need to wait for that written approval before you can submit a reimbursement request. So we're going to make awards on October 1. It will probably take, a few days or a week for us to get everybody their pre-award cost approval letter. So don't expect to be able to submit your first reimbursement request for summer expenses on 10/1 or 10/2. You have to wait till you get that letter, and then you'll be. I think that's just something that applicants who are awarded should accept. That will be part of the process. This could be for a couple of reasons. Perhaps you have pre-award costs that are not allowable and we just need to do some adjustments. Perhaps you are being awarded an amount less than what you requested and we have to make some adjustments to the budget overall. There could be a number of reasons why we ask you to do a budget amendment after you have been awarded. Again, this is just an FYI. If we get to that stage, if you are awarded, and if we need a budget amendment, OSSE will communicate with you at that time. This is just, so now we're taking a step back. We're taking a step back from pre-award costs, and we're thinking about that budget tab overall. This is a helpful chart to have with you when you are putting in those individual line items. This is what our external reviewers are reviewing for when they look at your budget. So we have a list here of allowable and non-allowable expenses. I won't read through those individually, but they are fairly self-explanatory, and we would encourage you to keep this top of mind when you're completing that budget. All right, we can breathe. We got through it. We just have very, very minor pieces to discuss at this very tail end of the EGMS walkthrough. And I've got those 3 tabs circled in yellow here. Budget amendments, you all don't need to do anything with that during the application process, so ignore it. Supporting documentation, there's nothing required in this section, and any uploads that are included here are supplemental, and they actually won't be considered in the scoring of your application. So if there's something you want to put in there, feel free, but it's not necessary. And while we will read it, we can't consider it in the scoring of the application. And finally, we have our assurances. So we have our program-specific assurances and the assurances agreement summary, just a couple of boxes that you need to check off before you can submit. And speaking of submission, we made it. So we're at the end and we have our submit button here. It's very important that you run the consistency check first. This will scan the application to ensure that all the required sections and the uploads were completed. And then after the consistency check is run, you need to click the submit to OSSE button. I highly encourage everyone to then go back to their dashboard and make sure you see this under your status, submitted for review. That means we have received it. If it says anything else, including consistency check, it means that we have not received it. And I mentioned this earlier, there is absolutely no exception that we can make for receiving applications after 3:01 p.m. And that includes accidentally leaving an application inconsistency check, which unfortunately we have seen in the past. So I'm just not making up scenarios to scare you all. It's a very real thing. And so I am encouraging you for a reason to ensure that you go back to that dashboard and make sure the application is in submitted status. These 2 buttons, application print and application history, are here. If you'd like to print out a PDF version of your application, you can do that. They're generated on the hour and they'll be emailed to you. And the application history is just where you can view where the application is in the review process. All right, so that concludes our EGMS walkthrough and the portions of the narrative application. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the review and award process. So as I've been alluding to throughout the presentation today, we have a review panel of external reviewers who are convening to review, score, and rank each application. The review panel is composed of neutral, qualified, and professional individuals with experience in education, and they've been selected for that expertise and knowledge. All of them must sign a conflict of interest statement before they begin their reviews. And as I've mentioned several times, the application will be scored against a rubric. And that rubric is both in EGMS in the overview section, and it's in Appendix B of the RFA. We do have several important updates to the rubric this year. If you're a new grantee, it's all new, but if you are a returning grantee, I wanted to highlight several of our updates here. So the application responses will be evaluated based on if they are compelling, complete, and clear. And we have a table at the top of the rubric that defines those terms and how we expect responses to be assessed against those criteria. So that's definitely something to check out. You'll notice the needs assessment, project description, and theory of action sections have been more clearly defined, and we have quantitative metrics for how a reviewer should score something that's strong, something that's weak, something that's good, and something that doesn't get a score. So we've made it less subjective and more objective. And the budget section has a very small 1 point item that's new to be scored. And that's just that you've included a complete budget. So that means both the narrative portion and the line item portion. And then our final update is one that you've already seen today, and that's that our projects that meet a funding priority are awarded plus 10 points. So regarding award notification, as I've mentioned throughout the presentation today, we anticipate making our awards on October 1st at the start of the new fiscal year, and we'll notify all of our applicants via EGMS and email whether or not they have been awarded. As I alluded to in the budget section, OSSE may award an applicant for only a portion of the budget that was requested in the application. And in that case, the applicant, or at this point, the grantee, would be asked to submit a budget amendment with a revised budget. Again, that is something that if that ends up applying to you, will be discussed in detail in the post-award webinar. Any applicant may choose to turn down an award, and each awarded applicant will receive their GAN in EGMS upon their application approval. I've included our next steps and deadlines chart here again. Again, this will be sent to all of those who submit an intent to apply. This will be sent to you via email and posted on the website. But if you want to grab a quick screenshot, feel free. I think this nicely outlines the upcoming dates and deadlines for you all. Great. So we're at our FAQs a little earlier than we managed to arrive yesterday. So we have several. I'll just click through so you all can see what I'm talking about. We have sort of several pre-generated FAQs based on prior competitions. I think instead of going through these, I will just click to the end so you can have my contact information. And I'll actually just take questions now. It's okay if you're asking something that's here already in the presentation, but I think it makes sense to use these last few minutes with your live questions. And then what we will do is we will be preparing an FAQ document. So all of the FAQs here in the presentation, all of these will be in that document, and anything that was asked yesterday or at today's webinar will also be in that FAQ document, and that will be posted online as well. One important thing that I'd like to mention as we're thinking about questions, in case anyone is feeling shy, due to the competitive nature of this competition, myself and my manager, Brianna, will not be able to answer specific questions related to this competition after this webinar today. So we will, if we receive a question from you, we will do our best to present you publicly available information in the RFA, in this recording, in the presentation, but we will not be able to answer program specific questions due to the competitive nature. So if there's something on your mind, please ask it here. Unfortunately, we found out yesterday, I thought I was able to unmute you all. And we found out yesterday that that is not the case. So I will troubleshoot that for the next my next webinar for third party. In the meantime, unfortunately, I do have to ask all of you to put your questions in the chat. And if you're typing something long, feel free to just type a quick message that's like question. So I know that something is coming. And so great, we've got our first question here from our folks at IDEA. When will this PowerPoint be available on the OSSE website? Very soon. I hate to say a date and then it doesn't happen and you all write me an email, but I'm hoping by this Friday. Today's Wednesday. I'm hoping by this Friday we can get it posted. If it's not available by this Friday, certainly by Tuesday. Monday is Memorial Day, so DC government is closed. So hopefully then by Tuesday or next Wednesday at the latest. But it's a priority for me to get this posted. So I just have to download the recording and make a few edits to the PowerPoint and send that to my team, who will be able to post on the website. So as soon as Friday, maybe as question from Rocket Ship folks, do you expect an FY26 continuation opportunity for awardees? Yes, that's a great question. And we do outline some of this in the prepared FAQ. So I'm not surprised this was asked. Yes. So we will have, it's a 3-year grant, but grantees will be submitting a continuation application for years 2 and years 3. So the continuation application of course, as you all are probably aware, but in case you're not, that the continuation application must demonstrate that program activities are occurring and that objectives are being met. And of course, depends on available funding as well. But yes, it will function in the same way that our 2-year grant has functioned, right? So in prior years, we awarded this grant and then there was one continuation year. It will be the same thing, but now we will have 2 continuation years because it's a 3-year grant. Thank you for that question. You're welcome. I'm seeing lots of typing, so I will patiently wait for these questions to come through. And in the meantime, while we're waiting, you can see our contact information here. Jessica, that's me. You're welcome to email me, and if you ask me a question that I can't answer, I will just let you know and do my very best to point you to the publicly available resources. Brianna Griffin is my manager. She's absolutely fantastic. You're welcome to CC her on any email coming to me. And then the EGMS help desk, I will just flag for those of you who are returning grantees. In the past, we had a phone line and an email for technical support. That is gone. And now you can actually directly create your own EGMS support ticket within the system. So once you all have this PowerPoint, you can access those live links, and that would be for something technical. Again, you're welcome to email, but if you're having an issue, like something isn't working in EGMS, it's probably fastest to just go through that ticketing process. Okay, got a great question here. If teacher candidates are prepared for dual licensure in both their content area and special education through our program, I'm assuming this would meet the competitive priority. Yes. Hi, Laura, by the way. Thank you so much for the question. The question was if they're being dual licensed for their content area and special education, would they meet the competitive priority? I would say yes. I would just make sure that through line is drawn very clearly for the reviewers, because they will be the ones assessing whether or not you all will have a chance to say if it meets a priority area, but they will ultimately be the ones scoring that. And so from my perspective, that seems like it would address a priority area, but I would just make sure to directly emphasize that in the application. And you're very welcome. I'm happy and enjoy seeing everyone on these webinars. It's great to see so many new names and familiar faces. From Miss Davis. Hi, Miss Davis. Sorry you had to come twice. I hope I didn't bore you today. The max funding per educator is $10,000. What would max funding look like for a facilitator or program manager role? Oh, that's a great question. There wouldn't necessarily be a maximum, right? So for your educators, there's that $10,000 max for like their direct support, right? If they're getting a stipend, if they're getting their graduate school paid for, what have you. But for other components of this program, there isn't necessarily the same maximum. So if you're reimbursing the salary for the person running the program, for supplies and materials, for professional development, there isn't necessarily that same $10,000 maximum. So it would be up to you and your internal team as you're crafting that budget, what percentage to reimburse for makes sense for your team. I'm glad it wasn't a waste of time. I'm glad to see you all here again. Um, Great. Well, we have 10 minutes, and I know questions can kind of pop up as folks digest. And so I will remain on the line. One flag I'll share is that I think I mentioned we will be adding all of the FAQs from yesterday's webinar and today's webinar to the document. So I would suggest looking at that FAQ document because most of you here today were not at yesterday's webinar. And of course, most of yesterday's attendees are not here. So at a minimum, there probably will be some questions on that FAQ document that maybe you hadn't thought of or that could be helpful. So just flagging that. Anything else that I can answer for folks at this time? All right. Well, it looks like, I see someone typing. I will wait. We've got plenty of, great. You're welcome. I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you everyone for being here. It looks like we might be all set on questions. So I appreciate everyone's attentiveness. I know some of those pre-award cost slides were very dense, and I appreciate you all bearing with me. I hope we were able to provide some clear information. I hope you all are all feeling excited about these changes. I know we are, and we're very glad that we could respond to grantee feedback and be nimble with this year's application. So I really appreciate you all for being here. We will get these slides posted as soon as possible, as well as this recording. Please go ahead and get that notice of intent to apply sent to me or our office if you think you will want to apply. I'll get you on our list and you'll be able to receive email updates as they come out. That's located on our website and in the appendix of the RFA. I'm seeing a few more typing, so I will. Great, thank you. You're so welcome. Great. I'm gonna stop the recording and I will